Hello everybody, welcome to our two-day webinar, which is Bonita, BPM and SharePoint, a perfect match for your connected enterprise. I am Olivia, Partner Program Manager at Bonita Soft, and we are very pleased today to have online with us our premier partner, Aprico, located in Belgium, who's going to be presenting that webinar. Hello Thomas.
Hello Olivia.
So before we start this webinar, just wanted to remind you that you should be having a headset in order to have a better sound quality to hear us correctly. And if at any point you have either trouble seeing our screens or hearing our voices, you can use the chat at your disposition in order to warn us. So Thomas, I'm going to pass you the mic so you can present the agenda for our two-day webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Olivia. Okay, so during this presentation, we are going to have the opportunity to cover a number of different points. First of all, I'll start off with a quick presentation of the contributors to this presentation and our organization. Olivia will quickly present the objectives and the goals of this webinar, and then we will jump into this project that we did with SharePoint and Bonita Soft. I'll give you a quick presentation of the context. We're then going to dive into the explanation of the solution that we designed. We're going to give you a quick demo, and then finally what we will do is we will quickly benchmark our solution with other alternatives which could have been considered for this project, and finally present our conclusions. I'll start off by introducing the contributors to this webinar.
Thomas, I'm sorry to cut you. It seems that we are still seeing you the first slide of your presentation. Maybe you can move on to the agenda slide and then the contributors?
Yes.
Super.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great. Sorry. Here's a quick overview of the contributors to this presentation. So the project and the webinar was essentially prepared by Olivier. Olivier is the CTO of organization, and then Ines and Khadija have both contributed largely to this webinar as well. Both Ines and Khadija are Microsoft experts, and so therefore have certainly given some input regarding SharePoint and other Microsoft technologies we'll be talking about later in the presentation. So we'll move on to the next slide. So a quick word about Aprico. Aprico, we are a solution delivery organization based in Belgium. Essentially what we try to do is we try to come up with creative solutions to technical problems. We have a number of partnerships, as you can see on this slide. Certainly Bonita Soft is one of them, but not only. The way we typically do projects is we try to combine a number of different technologies to come up with solutions which are going to be the best match to a business need, obviously respecting a certain number of IT standards and best practices. However, we thought that this specific project was quite interesting to present because we'll be talking about the integration between Bonita Soft, which is originally a Java-based product, and SharePoint, which is in the Microsoft ecosystem. So if we move on, Olivia, I'll give you the word to present the goals of this webinar.
Sure. Thank you, Thomas. So truly, what we wanted to be able to share with our audience today is the expertise and the experience of our partner, Aprico, that had a personal, in their company, a personal challenge, which was to have a solution in order to correctly and efficiently manage the requests for proposals they were receiving from prospects. But we realized, talking with Aprico as well, that this need of having a solution to manage documents such as SharePoint and a BPM solution and a platform for creating business application solutions such as Bonita BPM, this couple could actually serve other type of needs. And so, for example, we could imagine that in very different industries like financial services or telecommunications or even educations. I mean, most of the time you have to actually handle, produce, validate documents as well as create history of those documents. So these document management part is one part of the equation, if I can say so. The other part of the equation is the processes revolving around those documents. So we wanted to actually present the experience of Africa for their own purpose, for their own challenge, but as well keep in mind that we can extend this type of a couple in terms of technology towards other type of applications and verticals.
Absolutely. And so the purpose of this this presentation was indeed to illustrate how we structured and automated a number of tasks in a fairly complex business process. But as you correctly pointed out, this is just one example which could essentially be deployed in a number of different environments. So we essentially centered this project around our RFP answer process. So Aprico being a consultancy, obviously we evaluate a number of RFPs on a yearly basis. The idea is to decide where I would say the next source of business is going to come from for Aprico and the next project is going to come from. So I would say that for an organization of our size, on a yearly basis we evaluate anywhere between 50 and 80 RFPs, I would say. So the RFP answer process is kind of quickly modeled in this slide. Before I dive into the specific steps, just to give you a quick presentation of what that represents, I would say that the complexity comes with trying to evaluate very, very rapidly whether a project is going to be something which Aprico wants to do, and identify whether we want to do that as early as possible in the process, because from that point onwards there are a number of resources and there's a lot of effort required in essentially positioning Aprico as best as possible for these RFPs. These answers typically involve the collaboration between many people, and obviously the nature of these activities is fairly strategic for the organization, given the fact that that's where a lot of our business is going to come from. We've quickly modeled this process in this slide. The idea is to give you a very high-level description. We could go in a lot more detail, but a high-level description of the main steps in this process. So obviously we will receive the RFP information. Based on that, what we do is we typically gather and store all of the RFP information in SharePoint. From that point of view, we will provide more context and fill a lot of client information around these documents. And then from that point of view, we get a whole picture. Sorry, I'll quickly go back to the previous slide. That was a mistake on my side. But we will evaluate the RFP and decide whether we want to answer yes or no. If we decide that for whatever reason the RFP falls outside of our competencies or is simply not the right fit, we will stop there. If we do decide that it's an interesting opportunity, then obviously we will be transferring that to a project manager who is going to evaluate the workload required to answer that RFP, select all of the different resources which will be used in the answering activities of this RFP, and finally generate an Excel file which provides all of the estimations and the workload so that we know exactly basically what this project is going to entail. So moving on to the next slide, as you can imagine, answering an RFP requires the collection and the gathering of many, many documents. So all of the different documents which typically are sent by client organizations, providing as much context as possible on a project. But then, of course, the activities of simply answering these RFPs generate a lot of documents as well. So there's clearly, I would say, an important consideration around documents. The second thing is obviously the way we used to manage this process. A lot of steps were done manually. It was a lot of back and forth between various colleagues, trying to notify them as well that we were going to be involving them in a project. And so all of these basically pains which the organization had called for, I would say, greater structure. As you can see, typically to manage an RFP, from basically identifying the RFP to producing enough content to answer, took between 5 and 15 days, depending on the size of the RFP, which for a small organization like us is relatively important. It's an important time investment, and time is money. So basically what we wanted to do is we wanted to structure these activities, and we were using SharePoint for, I would say, document management, but we wanted to automate and structure the process further. So the first step which we took was basically looking at SharePoint's functionalities and to see whether SharePoint could represent a solution for us. SharePoint obviously does have a workflow engine, and there's a certain number of things which you can do, but we quickly came to the limits of SharePoint, in the sense that the process we were trying to manage was a lot more complex. From that point of view, we decided to look at tools which could provide a bit more governance, a bit more structure, and so we quickly looked at BPM tools. Now, being a BPM BonitaSoft partner, obviously BonitaSoft, we're quite convinced by the benefits which the solution proposes, and from that point of view we decided to evaluate BonitaSoft as a complementary module which could be coupled with SharePoint to basically provide a solution which was going to be end-to-end on this process. And so in the next slides we're going to have the opportunity to present the solution that we put together. So essentially the solution consists of two main modules, the first module being Bonita BPM, and then the second module being SharePoint. As you can see, obviously the idea is to try and make these two modules communicate together as seamlessly as possible. And so the idea is for BonitaSoft to expose its functionalities and its benefits via REST services, and SharePoint is essentially doing the same thing, mainly when we're talking about web parts, basically exposing its functionalities and communicating with BonitaSoft via the REST APIs as well. Now, given that we're using two separate modules, obviously we wanted to make things as easy as possible for users, and so we also implemented a single sign-on solution to be able to connect to both modules simultaneously, and again very easily and centrally for the user. So basically the BonitaSoft solution consists of a number of tools which we found very, very interesting in the context of this project. I would say that the first tool which we leveraged was the BPM connectors which Bonita proposes. In this specific project, they allow us to communicate with SharePoint quite easily and kind of hide all of the technical complexity. Now, Bonita is a wonderful tool in the sense that it contains a number of connectors which can connect to various different sources and various different technologies. In this specific case, obviously, we use the connector for SharePoint, which allowed us to connect to SharePoint quite easily. Here you've got basically a screenshot to show how quickly it is to use the SharePoint connector and basically be able to retrieve documents from SharePoint quite easily. Just in a few clicks, it's quite simple to be able to retrieve a document from SharePoint. The second tool which we used as part of the, I would say, Bonita Soft toolbox was the UI designer. So obviously, as part of this solution, we were going to require the development of user interfaces, and Bonita's UI designer allows us to very easily create user interfaces and easily also develop and add custom widgets. So the UI designer comes with, I would say, a number of components which already exist, but there's also the possibility to develop your own widgets to be used on this project. But obviously the power of this specific possibility is that you can reuse the widgets on other projects as well, and you can also even share them in a Bonita Soft community. But that's, I would say, outside of this project. Coming back to this project, obviously we were very quickly able to design, I would say, user interfaces and be able to configure all of that. So obviously custom widgets are one thing, but I would say, other main benefit with the UI designer is, if you can see in the top right corner, you've got all of these little drawings that essentially say that the UI designer offers natively responsive design. So regardless of the device which you're using, basically the code and the technology behind the graphical interfaces is basically AngularJS, which, as a lot of you will know, offers responsive design for a number of different devices. So moving on, we talked about, obviously, Bonita Soft, which was the first module in the solution, and the various tools within Bonita Soft which we leverage. Obviously the second part is SharePoint, and so again, the idea was to be able to link Bonita Soft and SharePoint seamlessly, to be able to create web parts in SharePoint using Bonita Soft. And so the idea was to be able to display Bonita BPM forms in the SharePoint web parts, be able to, as a user, basically manage the whole process from SharePoint. And I would say that all of the background tasks happening in this process management was basically handled by Bonita Soft, but unbeknownst to the user, so basically seamless integration. So that I would say is the main interest, and here you see a graphical representation of what it looks like for a user, where basically from the SharePoint environment you're able to basically execute a number of tasks. And again, same thing, SharePoint environment, a screen where the content which is on this screen is actually coming from Bonita Soft. So seamless integration. Another, I would say, important module in this solution was the need for, I would say, mobile access. So as a lot of you will know, SharePoint does not offer responsive design natively. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create an additional mobile layer which was going to be able to communicate with the solution efficiently. We chose Xamarin as an additional tool to be able to quickly develop mobile screens. And again, Bonita Soft is kind of the orchestrator between all of the different modules, where all of the information transits via Bonita Soft, and so consulting information on SharePoint via mobile device actually happens connecting through Bonita Soft and its connectors, which again, save a lot of time when it comes to designing a solution. So we've talked high level of what the solution looks like, but here what we're actually going to do is we're going to do a small demo of the solution so that you can actually see live how all of this works. So here in this first slide, what you see is the end-to-end process modeled in Bonita with the various different steps, and I would say that obviously the top layer is typically all of the activities performed by the sales manager, so typically me, and then on the bottom you see all of the steps typically executed by one of my colleagues. A project manager in this specific case will be using Olivier Jolin, a colleague, as an example. So we'll begin the demo now. Great. So typically here we are in a SharePoint environment. We are logged in as Thomas, that's me, and what we're going to do as the first step in the process is we're going to start the bid definition process. So we're doing that. The first task to execute is obviously to receive all of the RFP documents, which we've done, and so very quickly what we're going to do is we're going to select the file which we want to upload into the solution. There it is, click submit, and so automatically we have a screen generated with basically all of the fields which are required to continue in the process. All of this is basically customizable, so some of the fields are mandatory, others are optional. The idea here is just to quickly, for the purpose of the demo, introduce some data in the mandatory fields and click and submit. And by doing that, quickly it generates this screen. This screen is basically a validation step. We have set a limit of 20,000 euros as kind of a minimal threshold to decide that an RFP is interesting. Here, for the purpose of the demo, obviously we'll be entering a higher amount and clicking submit. And so basically based on that, what we've done is we've basically put in the necessary info, I would say, to generate the first task. And as you can see, in a matter of seconds, well, the tasks are generated. And so as you will see here, the first task which is generated is basically an invitation for my colleague Olivier, the project manager, to add the estimations on the project. So estimations are typically, when we receive an RFP, what we do is we want to estimate the workload which is going to be required, and so we will ask a project manager or an expert to be able to input, I would say, the various tasks in the project and associate that with a number of man days. So in this specific case, as you just saw, what we have done is we enter 2 user stories. For those who are familiar with the Agile methodology, we do a lot of projects in an Agile method, and so user stories are basically tasks in an Agile project, and so we ask our project manager to list a number of tasks, and you can add as many as you want, and associate a number of man days, and basically click on submit, and then what we want to do ultimately is we want to generate an Excel file kind of recapping all of the various estimations. So we've done that, and automatically there, as you see, highlighted in blue, a link is created towards a specific RFP site for this specific webinar. And so here we are, the RFP site is automatically generated with all of the documents which you can find back, which we will be using for the RFP. So all of certainly all of the documents which we got from in the initial steps, and then as well as this Excel file with, again, the different user stories, the name and the estimations associated. So the idea is obviously having a working document which very rapidly provides an overview of the workload. All of this is done, again, in a matter of seconds and done seamlessly. So that was basically just in a few steps, just to show you how quick and efficient it is to very rapidly create a site on SharePoint and centralize all of the documents in one place. Now, I talked about this mobile layer, which was also part of the solution, and here just a few screenshots to show you what it looks like. So basically, again, the possibility with these little forms that we quickly developed using Xamarin, the possibility to, again, interact with the SharePoint site and be able to, again, input information, retrieve documents, etc. Okay, so obviously what we've tried to do is we've tried to demonstrate how easy it was to integrate SharePoint and BonitaSoft. But as you saw at the very beginning of the presentation when we presented Aprico, we work with a number of technologies. We have a lot of expertise in Microsoft technologies, and certainly there are other solutions which exist in the world to basically try to do this, and staying as well in the Microsoft ecosystem. So for those of you who are familiar with that specific solution, there's a solution called Nintex. Nintex exists in the Microsoft ecosystem and is also a workflow automation tool. What we asked our experts to do was basically benchmark BonitaSoft and Nintex in the context of this specific project to try and understand if there were any vast differences and if there were some advantages in staying in a Microsoft ecosystem. And so in the next slides we will be seeing basically the different elements or aspects on which we compared both solutions. So first of all, what we wanted to do is we wanted to evaluate how quickly an IT department was going to be able to basically start working with both solutions. And when we look at an IT department, obviously we're looking at a number of different profiles and a number of different activities. So Nintex certainly has a number of benefits. Certainly it's very strong when we're talking about technical workflows, and has the ability to automate tasks very easily when we're talking about purely technical things. Obviously, because it's a technical product, I think developers will feel very at ease using that tool. And I would say that, you know, from a point of view of being able to grasp the product, about 15 days are required to be able to really start working with this product. Bonita BPM, when we compare it, I think the positioning is slightly different. It remains a technical tool, so I think it's important to emphasize that and to think that you know, developers and architects are definitely going to be involved in projects with Bonita. However, Bonita is more, I would say, business oriented, and so the I would say certainly that the business modeling activities can very rapidly be taken over by business analysts, because the modeling environment of Bonita is basically very user friendly. So there's going to be the possibility of quickly drag and drop different steps into a process, and so the process modeling activities are done very quickly. And then the idea is obviously, once again, going back to this notion of toolbox, a lot of the tools which Bonita offers are going to be able to streamline the development activities very quickly, and we will see that later in the presentation, that from a development time point of view, very quickly, that there's a possibility to put in place effective living applications very quickly. again, in about 7 days of training, we feel that a developer can feel comfortable with BonitaSoft, and so what we're going to do is we're basically going to take our RFP process and show you in a very, very specific example. What we've done is we've tried to focus on 2 or 3 steps in this process and do it in BonitaSoft and in Intex. So going back to the previous slide, basically this is the process modeled in BonitaSoft, and so very, very easily, so we're going to be able to create this step of RFP evaluation, which requires human interaction, and then the RFP site creation is done very, very seamlessly and very easily thanks to the BonitaSoft connectors. Now, using as a comparison the exact same steps in the Intex environment, basically what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create 4 separate steps. So request data, set a condition, create site, and assign to do task. We're going to have to create and configure all 4 tasks, which obviously from a workload perspective takes a lot longer. So when it comes to, I would say, very, very quickly creating a SharePoint site, well, our initial conclusion is that we can go a lot quicker with BonitaSoft and its connectors rather than with Intex, which as soon as basically the process requires a bit more interaction or requires a bit more flexibility, we quickly come to the limits of Intex, whereas BonitaSoft, being a bit more business oriented, offers a lot more solutions. Moving on, I would say another important aspect which we wanted to benchmark was the human interaction aspect, so with the users. Again, when it comes to providing, I would say, an environment which is easy to interact with, Nintex offers a lot less possibilities. So basically, every single time that we want to request information or data from the user, because Nintex is a tool which interacts with lists and libraries, again the workload is going to be quite intensive, because all of these lists and libraries are systematically going to have to be updated. Whereas with Bonita BPM, it's a lot more suited for, I would say, handling these human interactions, and out of the box it's very, very easy to be able to account for these human tasks. So here again, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and compare a small part of the process in both Bonita and in Intex. So again, through the UI designer and the different tools which Bonita offers, evaluating an RFP is very, very easily done, and we quickly come to a conclusion, whereas if we do the same thing in Intex, the complexity is that for every single step, which you see here, we have to basically configure the system to ask the user to respond to a task, as you can see in the orange box. And so this is where, again, the added complexity or the added workload comes from, is that because the tool relies on lists and libraries, we're going to have to, for every single step, ask the user to respond to a specific task, whereas in the Bonita environment, all of that is done, I would say, natively and seamlessly. Moving on, So reporting and I would say the visualization aspect of the project is another big differentiator for us. So for those who are familiar with SharePoint and Nintex, so in Nintex you do have a limited number of predefined reports which can be displayed as chart viewers or list viewers. But the problem is that these chart viewers are not compatible with all of the browsers. So for example, what we did is we tried to view this information in various browsers, and certainly in Firefox and Google Chrome we had some issues when it came to displaying these charts. Whereas in Bonita, once again, I would say that the user interface toolbox of Bonita is a lot more thorough, and as we saw earlier in the presentation, it relies on technologies offering responsive design, and so yeah, not only are all browsers supported, but also all sorts of devices. So from that point of view, we again have a lot more possibilities. Moving on, we decided to have a look at the maintenance efforts which were involved in both options. Again, developing a project is one thing, but then you also have to keep in mind that an application or a solution which you develop is going to have a full life cycle, and so therefore maintenance is going to be an important factor when it comes to choosing a technology. And again, Nintex being library and list-based, any project which is developed in Nintex when it comes to maintenance is going to involve a lot of maintenance on workflow content databases, but then also on the related map SharePoint content databases. So basically you've got two separate database environments which you have to maintain, which is complex, or if not complex, at least more time intensive. Whereas in Bonita BPM, again natively, that there's no need to redeploy the entire process, and it's very, very easy to do on-the-fly changes in the process, and I would say that Bonita Soft kind of in the background performs a number of activities to streamline and simplify the maintenance as well. So certainly when we compared both solutions, one next to the other, the conclusion that we came to is that working with Bonita was a huge time saver. The development time was divided by 2, and the maintenance efforts were a lot lower. So basically, based on the various aspects which we decided to evaluate when it comes to human interaction, when it comes to I would say the ability to consult information from a number of various browsers, when it comes to maintenance, we personally think that SharePoint and Bonita are a better wedding than Nintex. It's a complete and powerful solution for organizations. It certainly leverages all of the advantages of SharePoint and all of the advantages of, I would say, a BPM solution as well. It can integrate very, very easily, and certainly for our needs, which was the RFP answer process within Aprico, it was the right solution. We collaborate a lot easier. I think that the tool in place now gives us a lot more structure, and certainly in terms of quality and in terms of organization, a lot of those activities have improved as well. But I think in the end, what you try to benchmark as well is how long things take. And if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, answering an RFP for Aprico took between 5 and 15 business days, depending on the size of the RFP. And now, using this this solution which we developed using SharePoint and BonitaSoft, we certainly reduced that time to under 10 days, regardless of the RFP size, and with a much better level of quality. So all in all, considering all of the different aspects and the comparison with Nintex, we thought it was the right solution, and certainly we hope that this webinar was able to provide additional information when it comes to integrating both solutions. That's it from my side. Olivia, I'm not sure if you have anything to add, or if we can wrap up here.
I just have to add one thing. Thank you very much for that webinar, Thomas. I think it was very interesting to have your experience shared with a larger group of persons than your experts. So thank you very much for taking the time and the efforts to structure that presentation. Indeed, there are two ways for you listening to us today to contact Apricot and BonitaSoft if you're interested in coupling document management such as SharePoint and Bonita BPM. Obviously, our partner Apricot at info@apricot-consult.com, and BonitaSoft partners at bonitasoft.com. So again, thank you very much to Apricot, and thank you as well to all the person being online with us today for that webinar. It has been recorded and it will be shared on our mutual website. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice day ahead. Bye-bye.